get started. And what we're going into on this time is we're going into the third vision of Zechariah. But in the book of Zechariah, he's got about 8 visions in there where the Lord is speaking to Zechariah, and he's giving encouraging visions and revelations and messages to Israel. It's not just any Israel where it's Israel going through the wilderness with Moses, or Israel going into the land with Joshua or anything. It's actually Israel after they've gone through the 70 years of captivity, and they're coming out of that now. And this is where you kind of read into it with the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, and they actually, as we said before, latch onto it with the books of First and Second Chronicles. And so the generation that went into the 70-year captivity, as they were captured on purpose through the fifth course of judgment, through Leviticus 26, it's not the same generation coming out. And so now they're being led by Zerubbabel, they're being led by Joshua the high priest, they're being led by Ezra, Nehemiah, the whole group of people. And so, as we read before in Zechariah chapter 1, verse 1, it's in the 8th month in the 2nd year of Darius, the Medo-Persia ruler, who says they're free to go. And so we went so far through about 2 visions, and those are 2 previous studies you can see in our YouTube channel, our YouTube playlist, if you want to go back and see them. But vision 1 pretty much had horsemen, sent by God to report on the state of the nations, the Gentile nations, as Israel's 70th year of captivity was wrapping up, was done. And so they pretty much speak to the angel of the Lord. We said this was a pre-incarnate to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Lord Jesus Christ, who was among the myrtle trees. And we had said the myrtle trees had represented the concept of restoration. It was the time of restoration for Israel to come out from these nations in which they were exiled to, and they could come back and start rebuilding Jerusalem and the temple and the walls and the cities all over again. And so the Lord would show pretty much mercy to Israel again. It was time to start showing mercy according to the covenant they had. And they were going to start doing this. And the Lord was actually sore displeased with the Gentile nations. So it was a time of rebuilding and restoration. And it's actually, it's come to pass. That was the first vision. In the second vision, then you started to see 4 horns, and we talked about the cross references where you see horns in the Bible. We established through a great explanation and detail that the 4 horns were Assyria and Babylon and Mede and Persia. Those were the 4 kingdoms that had, pretty much dispersed them and scattered them. And then pretty much how the Lord says, well, I'm going to send out 4 carpenters. Pretty much to go out, and as what carpenters do, they tear down, and they are going to go and tear down these nations, make sure that they're not going to cause any more trouble to this nation going back to rebuild. And so that makes up the second vision. So now we're going into the third vision today. So we're going to go into Zechariah chapter 2. We'll just read it now. It's 13 verses. And we've actually done this before. We'll kind of get into it in a little bit. But in Zechariah chapter 2, we'll just read through it now. Verse 1 says, I lifted up mine eyes again, and looked, and behold, a man with a measuring line in his hand. Then said I, Whither goest thou? And he said unto me, to measure Jerusalem, to see what is the breadth thereof, and what is the length thereof. And behold, the angel that talked with me went forth, and another angel went out to meet him, and said unto him, Run, speak to this young man, saying, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls, for the multitude of men and cattle therein. For I, saith the Lord, will be unto her a wall of fire round about, and will be the glory in the midst of her. Ho, ho, come forth, and flee from the land of the north, saith the Lord. For I have spread you abroad as the 4 winds of the heaven, saith the Lord. Deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwellest with the daughter of Babylon. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, after the glory hath he sent me unto the nations which spoiled you. For he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of his eye. For behold, I will shake mine hand upon them, and they shall be a spoil to their servants. And ye shall know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for, lo, I come, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, saith the Lord. And many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people. And I will dwell in the midst of thee, and thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto thee. And the Lord shall inherit Judah his portion in the Holy Land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. Be silent, O all flesh, before the Lord, for he is raised up out of his holy habitation. So as we go back into verse 1 of chapter 2, now we're looking into the third vision. We're kind of plugging in what we already studied from the first vision and from the second vision. Then we're getting into this third vision. And again, these are deep visions where you got to cross refer to certain things, but remembering the audience to whom it speaks to. It's not talking to the church, the body of Christ. So when someone goes and reads this, maybe it's an individual or a church or a Christian group, and they say, well, how can I apply this literally into my life today? That's the wrong question to be asking. That's when you read this and you're saying, how can I literally apply these visions that I'm reading? You're trying to figure out what the book has to say. You may not know about right division, what that is, 2 Timothy 2:15, how to apply all of God's truth, to rightly divide all of God's truth, and how to apply what books belong to us in the 66 books of the King James Bible. This is not one of those books where you're going to literally apply them to yourself, but allow the truth of the history of God's word to Israel to be literally applied to those in time past. Again, like we said, to Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Ezra, Nehemiah, and this audience of Israel, Jews, Hebrews, in the book of Zechariah, who's rebuilding Israel as they come out of the 70-year captivity, which we've previously spoken about in our other studies as well. So we're going to go through and take a look at this and pretty much see how in this vision Jerusalem will become a city without walls, indicating prosperity. We're going to see divine protection, and this vision is going to reassure the exiles who are returning of a hopeful future that's going to be under the care of the Lord himself. So verse 1, as we go back into it, says, I lifted up mine eyes again, here's our third vision, and looked, and behold, a man with a measuring line in his hand. So we're kind of seeing multitasking going on here as you apply the first vision with the second vision, and here we are in the third vision. You've already got angelic activity, as we kind of studied in our second vision, where you have the four horns and you've got four carpenters going after the four horns, making sure that they're not going to cause any problems. That was the second vision. These nations are not going to disperse again. They're not going to cause trouble. They're actually going to be, put away, if anything. And so while that's taking place, as that's going on, you're seeing here a man with a measuring line in his hand. And measuring, as you study prophecy, you'll see measuring is something that's a normal thing. It happens quite a bit. If you look at Ezekiel chapter 40, for example, verse 3, that's Ezekiel chapter 40. When you read Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48, you see the explanation and the details of the millennial temple, and it just goes detail after detail, talking about the gates, talking about the just intricate details of the millennial temple. And you're seeing Ezekiel chapter 40 and verse 3. And you see they're talking about, again, the millennial temple. And we'll go to verse 2. It says, And the visions of God brought he me into the land of Israel, and set me upon a very high mountain, by which was as the frame of a city on the south. And he brought me thither, and behold, there was a man, whose appearance was like the appearance of brass, with a line of flax in his hand, and a measuring reed, and he stood in the gate. And the man said unto me, Son of man, behold with thine eyes, and hear with thine ears, and set thine heart upon all that I shall show thee. For to the intent that I might show them unto thee, art thou brought hither. Declare all that thou seest to the house of Israel. And behold, a wall on the outside of the house round about, and in the man's hand a measuring reed of 6 cubits long by the cubit, and an handbreadth. So he measured the breadth of the building, 1 reed, and the height, 1 reed. And he kind of goes on from there, with the concept of taking a measuring stick and measuring certain things in this millennial temple. If you go 7 chapters over to Ezekiel chapter 47, you look at verse 4. And pretty much says, again, he measured a thousand and brought me through the waters. The waters were to the knees. Again, he measured 1,000 and brought me through, and the waters were to the loins. Afterward, he measured 1,000, and there's this constant measuring going. This necessity to measure. In this case, the areas and the portions of the millennial temple. So it's all about measuring. It's a right thing to go around measuring the areas and the portions of this area that's going to be set up for Israel in the millennial kingdom. And if we go to the book of Revelation, we'll see it also again in Revelation chapter 11 in verse 1. Revelation chapter 11 verse 1. Instead of it just being the millennial temple, and instead of just seeing it here when it comes to measuring Jerusalem, the area that Jerusalem is going to be set up at, the area where the millennial temple is going to be at, or measuring of the millennial temple itself, you'll see in Revelation chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not." So there's things that the angels are there to measure, and there's things that they're not there to measure. And so you see this come into play here. If you look at Revelation 21:15, Revelation 21:15 says, "And he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city, and the gates thereof, and the wall thereof." So again, they're measuring cities and temples and reeds, and cities and gates and walls and just all sorts of different things. But it's a right thing to go ahead and do so, knowing the areas, understanding the areas, and God already knows what it is He's going to measure and what the length and breadth and width of all these certain things are. But it's sort of like getting ready to get something done or have something plotted or laid out or whatever it is. In this case, when you bring it all back to Zechariah chapter 2, they're pretty much getting things measured in order to say, okay, we're going to set this up over here, we're going to put this over there. And pretty much what we're seeing is measuring the city would be a way of, assessing its dimensions and, playing the execution of the rebuilding process. That's what we're seeing. So overall, the act of measuring Jerusalem kind of shows the divine attention, the care that God's giving to showing that this is taking place. So again, that angelic multitasking, if you want to call it something like that, where not only is Israel, like Zerubbabel and Malachi and Zechariah and Haggai and Ezra and Nehemiah, they're seeing not only that these four horns are being dealt with by four carpenters, they're also seeing a man with a measuring stick coming in a vision or being explained to in a vision that some measuring is taking place as well. So there is some construction taking place, if you want to call it that. There's some assessment taking place. There's some things that are taking place that wasn't taking place when they were in the 70-year captivity. Now it's time to set things up. It's time to get things moving. It's time to get things building. It's go time. It's time to get things moving for Israel. And so this is the encouragement of these visions, saying that this is what's supposed to be taking place now. You'll have no opposition from these previous Gentile nations that caused you trouble in the past. Let's measure some things up and get things ready to go, because it's time, Israel, for your return and for your rebuilding. So he goes through and he says this, and so it's showing the restoration of God's chosen city, God's people. It reflects the hope and reassurance of God's presence and protection, in their lives as time marches on. So, the carpenters are doing their part to handle the nations that scattered Israel in the first place. And they're, even as we saw from chapter 1, they're at rest at that moment. But God will make sure to take care of them, as He's upset at how they're at rest, or they're happy that Israel's been scattered for 70 years. And so it's time to measure Jerusalem. It's time to measure the area where it's going to go, the breadth and the height and the dimensions and so forth. So we see that there. And then as we go into verse 2, "Then said I, Whither goest thou? And he said unto me, To measure Jerusalem, and to see what is the breadth thereof, and what is the length thereof." Verse 3, "And behold, the angel that talked with me went forth, and another angel went out to meet him." So you're kind of seeing more of this angelic activity where one angel, and even in the vision, One angel's going out to talk to another angel who's coming back and talking to Zechariah. And these are the messengers of God who are kind of talking and dispensing messages back and forth to each other as it's being brought back to Zechariah. It's kind of like this one is speaking to this one, who's then now talking to Zechariah from God in the first place. But you're seeing this in verse 3. Behold, the angel that talked with me went forth, and another angel went out to meet him. So just kind of seeing how this is interestingly taking place. The communication, the channels of how this is kind of coming into play. It says, and said unto him, Run, speak to this young man, saying, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls for the multitude of men and cattle therein. So verse 4 comes into play. And it's interesting to see how verse 4 is, laid out, because pretty much what they're talking about there, it's actually, that's a profound meaning, talking about the prosperity that's going to come when the kingdom is set up, when the kingdom comes, into play. There's going to be such exponential growth, such exponential population, such exponential, and inhabitation and promise and prosperity, that this is going to be something where we see there. It's going to be inhabited as towns without walls, as we're seeing. And so, cities during that time were surrounded by protective walls, essentially, during that time, to defend against enemies and provide security against the inhabitants that are in that city. So the verse is suggesting that in the future, when the kingdom is set up and God sets up his earthly kingdom, his kingdom on earth, that there's going to be so many people in that city, so many people, so many cattle, so much cattle as well, that it won't have need for walls for defense. So the verse conveys a message of prosperity. It conveys a message of abundance for Jerusalem. And that as they start to set up now, it's going to be something that's going to work for those in the ages to come. It's going to symbolize the city's growth, expansion, and the fulfillment of God's promise to restore and bless His people. And so, that little flock nation that will be there in the ages to come, that nation, and the city's going to be so prosperous, so populous, that it's going to be like a collection of towns just spreading out beyond the confines of even the walls that Nehemiah is going to set up. And if you remember, as we were doing the parables, that was essentially the message of the parable of the grain of mustard seed. How it started out as a grain of mustard seed, and the Lord was telling the little flock, "You're going to start out, something tiny like this, but you will grow into a big tree, so big that the other nations will kind of perch in your branches and look to, just sit and abide in your branches, Israel. You'll start out humble, you'll start out small, but you will grow. And you'll grow into something so big that you'll start out as a seed, you'll grow into a tree. That growth will take place." And we kind of went to Daniel 2 as a reference, where the mountain grows and takes over the earth through that dream given in Daniel chapter 2. That was also the parable of the hidden leaven, where the leaven was hid into 3 measures of meal, and eventually that grew as well. And so it took time, but it grew. And so the leaven had nothing to do with sin, but the concept was the growth. The message was the growth. Israel, hang on, you're going to grow. And so you're seeing this also in Zechariah chapter 2. So it's not like it's a new message or it's a shocker of a message. It's a message that's always been there since, at least here we are in Zechariah chapter 2. And so you can cross refer, and this is not a cross reference. It's not your everyday cross reference. There's not too many Bible students that can jump into Zechariah chapter 2, go, "Oh, I know exactly what this is because I'm studying it deeply," and then run over to the parables and say, "Oh, that must be the parable of the grain of mustard seed and the parable of the hidden leaven," because not too many people are getting into this that deep and be able to cross refer and understand that the same message in Zechariah is being sent into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John with the parables. But it's there nonetheless, and it's for Israel, not for the body of Christ. It's rightly divided. It's meant for the same audience as far as prophecy goes, and it'll come into play when God sets up His kingdom in the ages to come. And so we see that there. So we see that through the third vision there, and we're in verse 4. And so Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls for the multitude of men and cattle therein. That's verse 4. So, and the multitude of men, if we look, we'll even see it in the book of Zechariah. We look at Zechariah chapter 8, verse 4. Zechariah talks about this a couple times in his own book, but so we'll use some quick cross references. Zechariah chapter 8, verse 4, where it says, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, there shall yet old men and old women dwell in the streets of Jerusalem, and every man with his staff in his hand for very age. And the streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in the streets thereof. That's going to be in the kingdom, where this will take place based on what we're seeing now in Zechariah chapter 2. And when you go to Zechariah chapter 12, verse 6, this comes up again. He says, In that day will I make the governors of Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in a sheaf. And they shall devour all the people round about on the right hand and on the left. And Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. They're going to be inhabited again. So they're going to grow. Like we saw in the parable of the mustard seed, like you see in the parable of the hidden leaven. It's going to be inhabited. It's going to keep growing. Then if you go to Zechariah chapter 14, verse 10, see it again. And it says, And all the land shall be turned as a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, and it shall be lifted up and inhabited in her place from Benjamin's gate unto the place of the first gate, unto the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananiel unto the king's wine presses. And men shall dwell in it, and there shall be no more utter destruction, but Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited. Again, talking about the concept of them being safely inhabited, people will dwell in it, and it's going to be very much inhabited as towns without walls for the multitude of men and cattle therein. And so you're seeing that there, the abundance of people and livestock. It paints a picture of a thriving and a flourishing city there. So we're seeing that there, so that they're going to be, this prophetic explanation of what the kingdom's going to be like, especially for specifically Jerusalem, that's now being measured as the four nations that were previously scattering Jerusalem are now being dealt with, and will continue to be dealt with even into the book of Revelation, where God will deal with all enemies. It reassures the people of Jerusalem that their city's desolation and exile will be replaced with prosperity and safety. So it serves as a message of hope and encouragement to trust in God's promises and his plan for their future. And that's good hope for Zerubbabel. That's good hope for Joshua the high priest, for Nehemiah, Ezra, and so forth. So you see that there. Verse 5 says, For I, saith the Lord, will be unto her a wall of fire round about, and will be the glory in the midst of her. And so we see a little bit about that if we look at Zechariah chapter 9 and verse 8. He says it again here. Zechariah chapter 9, and he says it here in verse 8. Which says, And I will encamp about mine house because of the army, because of him that passeth by, and because of him that returneth, and no oppressor shall pass through them any more. For now have I seen with mine eyes. No oppressor is going to come and attack the city of Jerusalem, with the Lord being the light thereof, from Revelation 21 and 22. He's going to be the light, the lamp, the protector, the wall of fire that protects all of Jerusalem, as we're seeing that here in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 8, Zechariah chapter 2, verse 5, all throughout the book of Revelation. He's their protector. He's their wall of fire, essentially, as we see that there. And so, also when he says this, it's kind of signifying he's under their watchful care. He's under God's, Jerusalem is under God's watchful care, during this time, and he's their defense. And so he's providing security from all those external threats and all those external enemies and dangers, and he's on top of that abundant population that's going to be in there during the kingdom. So he's going to be there for that, and he's going to be also their glory in the midst of them, as he says there in that latter part of the Zechariah 2:5, and will be the glory in the midst of her. And so you'll see such verses. We'll just give the cross references out. When the Lord gathers, heals, and restores Israel from all nations, brings them all together, he's going to be their glory Some verses, it's mostly in Isaiah. You'll see in Isaiah 11:11, Isaiah 57:18, Isaiah 60:19. And again, you can research these verses for yourself. Jeremiah 30, verse 3, and Jeremiah 31, verse 10. So I just want to give those out just for time's sake. But when you get to the next one, now we're in Zechariah chapter 2, verse 6, and he says, Ho, ho, come forth and flee from the land of the north, saith the Lord, for I have spread you abroad as the four winds of the heaven, saith the Lord. And he spread them abroad according to the fact that they were disobedient to the Leviticus 26 covenant. So the 5 portions of judgment did come into play as was promised, as they had agreed into a covenant with God. And so you see that in Leviticus chapter 26, that 5th course came through. They were scattered as God promised that would happen if they remained disobedient. The north went into Assyria, the south went into Babylon, and that did come true to form, true to pass. And so verse 6 says, Ho, ho, come forth. And if you remember around Christmas time, and I say that later around December, we do a study where we talk about the only time you'll see ho, ho in the Bible, anything that has to do with the pagan beliefs of what's December 25th or Christmas. This is as close to ho, ho, ho as you get. And so you'll see a study on our YouTube channel called Ho, Ho versus Ho, Ho, Ho. This is it here. You probably get a little bit of the red and the white from Santa in Zechariah chapter 1 with the horses. But again, we talked about how that's about the bloodshed, the wars. That's why those red and white horses are there. But nonetheless, and they go throughout, nonetheless, they go through all the earth, just like Santa's supposed to go through all the earth in one night. But of course, they do it because they're policing the nations and reporting back to God about what's going on. So concepts are all there, but they're gathered for whole different reasons. Just it kind of falls apart into pagan beliefs on December. But nonetheless, we're seeing what the visions actually mean when you go through the book of Zechariah. But in verse 6, Ho, ho, come forth and flee from the land of the north. You're seeing here in verse 6. Now, in verse 6, what you're seeing here, the land of the north is Babylon. When he's referring to this, that's that land of the north. And that was one of the 4 horns we had also gone through as well. So the Lord is referring to specific exiles. And so he's saying, don't just stay where you've been exiled, flee from it and come back and help. For those who were scattered, they were brought to captivity. And so the invitation is a command to return with the other exiled Israelites, come back into Israel and come back into their ancestral land of Jerusalem and help restore it again. God promises to protect and restore them in prophecy as they heed his call to return. And so he starts to say this in verse 6, for I have spread you abroad as the 4 winds of the heaven. Now those 4 winds are just directional, north, south, east, west. That's what the 4 winds mean, saith the Lord. So we see that there. It says, deliver thyself, O Zion, in verse 7. Deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwellest with the daughter of Babylon. Of course, when he's talking about deliver thyself, he's not talking about deliver them from the penalty of their sins, but you're talking thyself being that group of Hebrews, that group of Jews, Israelites that are under the leadership of Zerubbabel and Ezra and Nehemiah. So he's saying, deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwellest with the daughter of Babylon. As they were all once there, and they were under the headship at one point, living under Babylon's roof for 70 years. You're seeing as that goes through there. He's pretty much saying it's time to depart from there. Even if you look at 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 1, even the Apostle Peter's, at some point, he's going to write even an epistle to those that are still there in his day. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 1. See if I got that right. Find it here. I think it is, yeah. It says, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the strangers scattered through Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia. And you see this, how it starts out here. So these are the strangers scattered, the 12 tribes scattered from James chapter 1, verse 1. If you go to 1 Peter chapter 5, I believe it's in verse 13. Yeah. You see all these different churches or all these different cities. He even says here, 1 Peter 5:13, from all those different strangers that are still scattered, says, the church that is at Babylon, elected together with you, saluteth you, and so doth Marcus my son, so on and so forth. And you see the little flock church, the church concerning the kingdom, the church regarding prophecy, regarding the law, regarding their New Testament, 613 points of law written in their hearts type of thing, earthly kingdom, uh, that's in Babylon. And so he's writing about that. So we're seeing here in Zechariah, he's saying, come forth and flee from the land of the north. The Lord doesn't want anybody in there. Babylon has a lot to pay for. He's sending out carpenters to pretty much, take care of them, deal with them. And he doesn't want anybody in there. And so he's pretty much writing about that here. Say, for I have spread you abroad as the four winds of the heaven. Deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwellest with the daughter of Babylon. And because that's not only talking literally, but that's also talking spiritually. If they have linked up spiritually with their pagan beliefs, if they've linked up with anything that has to do with them, rather than their ancestral land of Israel. So see that there from verse 7. So he's going forth and he's talking about this. And so he's saying it's a call to leave the land represented by Babylon and return to the land of promise, which is Zion or Jerusalem. And so he goes forth and he's saying, to experience the restoration, the freedom, and the blessing of their own land, which they're supposed to be in. And so if you look at Revelation 18, verse 1, you'll see more about how the Lord refers to Babylon, deals with Babylon in the book of Revelation. By then, Babylon is up to its full capacity of being wicked and evil. And that's Revelation 18, verse 1. And it says, and after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. So Babylon has always been, a troublesome place. And when her religion kicks in and when the Antichrist kind of revs up what's going on in Babylon and spreads it out to the whole world, that's when, it's really time to make Babylon pay. And through 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 13 and Revelation chapter 18, all the way back to Zechariah chapter 2, and you go way back, the Lord's saying, just come out of her. Don't have anything to do with her. Let's go back to Jerusalem where you belong. Where we're starting to see all the way back from the beginning, a man with a measuring line saying, let's measure this city up. Let's get it ready to build. Let's get it ready to go. Don't have anything to do with Babylon, Israel. Let's come out of her. Let's go back to Jerusalem. Let's get things lined up and ready to go. Babylon will be dealt with. All those nations that scattered you will be dealt with. And so this is what we're seeing from those first three visions as you plug them all in together, and you see that there's a lot going on there with just the first three visions. So he's saying this in deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwells with the daughter of Babylon. Verse 8 goes on to say, for thus saith the Lord of hosts, after the glory hath he sent me unto the nations which spoiled you. In referring to those Gentile nations which had inflicted harm or persecution or devastation upon the Jews. And often in the context of those, military conquests. Let me see if I got that right. Or, even exiling them. What you see in the four horns from that second vision. So you're saying, for thus saith the Lord of hosts, after the glory hath he sent me unto the nations which spoiled you, for he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of his eye. And you see the apple of his eye, talking as a phrase for Israel. You see it in, I'll just give these phrases for time's sake. You'll see it in the apple of his eye. You'll see that come up in Deuteronomy 32, verse 10. And you'll see it in Psalm 17, verse 8. Those are the times where the apple of his eye comes up when it refers to Israel, Jerusalem, Hebrews, Jews. The apple of his eye, that's Israel. But you see that there. But it says, "For he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of his eye." And so that means retribution. That means, don't touch the apple of God's eye, Israel. So we see that there. So when you go into verse 9, it says, "For behold, I will shake my hand upon them, and they shall be a spoil to their servants, and ye shall know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me." So it gets kind of interesting there. If we look at Isaiah chapter 13, verse 11. Isaiah chapter 13, verse 11 is a good cross reference for what we're reading here. Pretty much you're seeing how the Lord's going to punish those who are messing with Israel. And he says here in Isaiah 13, verse 11, it says, "And I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible." And so you see that mentioned there in Isaiah 13, verse 11. And there's many more verses that says pretty much the same thing as you keep seeing more cross references to it. But going back to Zechariah chapter 2, verse 9, it says, "For behold, I will shake mine hand upon them." There's your Isaiah chapter 13, verse 11. And it says, "They shall be a spoil to their servants." So what you're seeing is this means that those who had acted as conquerors or oppressors not to Israel in general, the Hebrews and Jews that were taken away for 70 years, he's saying that they themselves will be defeated and they'll become subject to the very people that they had subjugated. So now everything gets flipped upside down. It symbolizes the reversal of fortunes, if anything, where the oppressors will suffer the consequences of their actions. And you think about such verses like Isaiah chapter 60, where the Gentiles actually bow to Israel when they rise and become the head and not the tail, something like that. And if you look at Esther chapter 9, verse 1, a good verse that shows that reversal of fortune, so to speak, Esther chapter 9 and verse 1. We see here it says, "Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them, the Jews gathered themselves together in the cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt." So it actually, in the book of Esther, Esther becomes the queen, and those that sought to lay hands on the Jews now actually found out that they who vocally said, "Let's go hurt the Jews that are in our land," Esther, a Jew, becomes the queen, reverses the decree, and says, all those who just vocally said, "Let's go hurt the Jews," go hurt them. And there was a reversal of fortune in the book of Esther. You see that from Esther chapter 9. But you see that concept, that lesson, that teaching come into play here, what we're seeing here in verse 9 of Zechariah chapter 2, where you're seeing it say, "For behold, I will shake mine hand upon them, and they shall be a spoil to their servants." Now the reversal of fortune is being played to them, "And ye shall know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me." So verse 10 is going forth, and it's just pretty much saying, "Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for lo, I come, and will dwell in the midst of thee, saith the Lord." And so you see where Israel is going to be singing in the kingdom. They're going to be singing, songs. You can see them singing in Revelation 15:3, the Song of Moses. The Song of Moses is Deuteronomy 32. So there are songs to be sung. You can see them singing in Exodus 15. So Israel sings songs, and you see them there when it's talking about "Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion." There are songs that they sing, and Deuteronomy 32 is one of them. It's called the Song of Moses, where in Revelation 15, that's exactly what they sing. So that's something that we see there from Zechariah 2:10. And in verse 11, it says, "And many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, and shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto thee." So we're moving way into the future now. We started out with the man with the measuring stick, measuring how we're going to start getting Israel set up. Now we're seeing the prosperity of Israel and the kingdom. We're seeing how this is all going to play out as Israel, like Zerubbabel, and everyone takes their first step to get things started. The vision is showing the result of them taking their first step. Joshua the high priest, Ezra, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, as they take their first step and get things going. The prosperity that is going to be a result of that in the kingdom, as the Lord destroys all the enemies, the Lord does the work, the Lord protects, the Lord is the wall of fire, the Lord is the one doing everything and continuing things onward from their work. You've got angelic, heavenly multitasking going on, combined with earthly channel blessings. You got the Jews here doing their part, and they all have a purpose, all in God's prophetic plan, which at this point in the books of Haggai and Zechariah and Malachi is just to get things set up and running again, so that things can move into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And at the same time, you've got these kingdoms ruling. You've got Babylon ruling, you've got Medio-Persia ruling, you've got Greece that's going to rule next. And then when you get to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you'll have Rome ruling over during the times of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, just like it says in the book of Daniel. But you're seeing here pretty much that they're talking about how, going back to verse 10, um, sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for lo, I come and will dwell in the midst of thee, saith the Lord. And many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day, future, and shall be my people, and will dwell in the midst of thee, and shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me unto thee. So we're seeing that there. If you look at Revelation 22 in verse 3, Revelation 22, verse 3, right at the end of our Bibles here. You see here, as it talks about how it says, and I will dwell in the midst of thee. It says, and there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him, and they shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads, and there shall be no night there, and they need no candle, neither the light of the sun, for the Lord God giveth them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. So the Lord's literally, as it says there, they're going to see his face, and they're going to see him standing. That's why he says that verse talks about where two or three are gathered in the midst of him. He's there. It's because he's literally there in the midst of them. They can see him. They can see his face. He's their light. He's their sun. He's their moon. They don't need the sun or the moon or the light, or he's there. He's everything that's there in that kingdom. He's everything they need. And so we see that there, going back to verse 11. He'll dwell in the midst of them, and they'll know that the Lord of hosts has sent him, the Lord, unto them. And so it's the verse speaks of a future time when many nations will turn to the Lord and become part of his people. They'll become part of it. Like the parable of the mustard seed, and it turns into a tree, and the nations perch in the branches of it. You're seeing that here again in the book of Zechariah, chapter 2. So that parable about, when the parables are in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it's because he's building on what he was telling Zerubbabel, Joshua the high priest, Ezra, Nehemiah, and others in the past. And so the parables are, again, not meant to be a shocker. It's meant to be something where he's building on information that will lead them into this kingdom. And of course, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and everyone else, they didn't want to hear it in the first place. They didn't believe the Lord in the first. They used his word as something to just have man-made rules that glorified themselves rather than glorifying God. So we see that here in verse 11. That's what we're looking at. But pretty much we're seeing that it foreshadows the fulfillment of God's promises to bless all the families of the earth through the descendants of Abraham, the Genesis 12 promises, Genesis 12, 1 through 3, those covenant promises. This is one of the many fulfillments of it that's mentioned here as they get started with it. The fulfillment of it comes through in Revelation, Hebrews through Revelation. Even if you look at Matthew chapter 8, verse 11, you see a little glimpse of it mentioned here And I believe this is where the Lord is rebuking the Pharisees and the Sadducees. If I have that verse correctly understood, correct, if I got the correct verse in mind. Matthew 8, verse 11, as he talks about the kingdom. Yeah. Matthew 8:11, he says, "And I say unto you that many shall come from the east and west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob," literally, "in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom," the Pharisees and Sadducees, those are supposed to be sons of Abraham, "shall be cast out into outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So it's interesting how he paints that picture all in one verse, and how we're reading it in Zechariah, we're seeing it in Revelation, we're seeing it in Isaiah, we're seeing it all over the place. How he paints that picture there. But we see that there in verse 11. So going into verse 12, Zechariah 2:12, "And the Lord shall inherit Judah his portion in the Holy Land, and shall choose Jerusalem again." So as we see that there, where the Lord will inherit Judah his portion in the Holy Land, and this refers to God reclaiming and taking possession of Judah as his chosen people in their ancestral land. It emphasizes God's faithfulness to his covenant with the descendants of Judah. And so you see that even in how it talks about their his inheritance. Lo shall inherit Judah his portion. If you look at even as early back as Exodus chapter 19 and verse 5, sort of a well-known verse we've seen before. Exodus 19 verse 5, talking about the Lord's inheritance prophetically. It says, "Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people." That fits a couple parables we know from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. "For all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and an holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel." And then it kind of goes on from there, but you're seeing how it's a peculiar treasure. Indeed, it's an inheritance there. If you look at Deuteronomy 32, and I believe it's in verse 9. It's like a treasure he inherits. Deuteronomy 32, verse 9. And he says here, "For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance." That's what we're seeing. The lot of his inheritance. And this inheritance is what we saw from a little bit of Exodus, is that all of his people are his treasure. So we see that mentioned there. But Jacob is the lot of his inheritance there. Just as I mentioned, some cross references we can see there. So we see that mentioned there, and ultimately the Lord is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. If we look at Revelation chapter 5, verse 5, when it comes to what tribe is the Lord from, speaking of not just the fact that he's 100% God, but at the same time he's 100% man. So, what tribe as a Jew did he come from? Revelation 5:5 says, "And one of the elders saith unto me, Weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah." So you're seeing he's coming, he's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. There's a name for it, the Lord, that there. The root of David hath prevailed to open the book, and so on and so forth. But that's why he's saying there, "He shall inherit Judah his portion." He's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And so you see that there. And then verse 13, our last verse here in vision number 3, Zechariah's third vision. It says, "Be silent, O all flesh, before the Lord, for he is raised up out of his holy habitation." So it's just pretty much talking about this phrase here. It's just talking about the exalted position of God there. "Be silent, O all flesh." His divine majesty, his deity there. It signifies God's active presence and involvement in prophecy. And so we're seeing that there. He's raised up out of his holy habitation in the third heaven. So it's understood as that. And you can see it, and I'll just give out the verses. Just talking about Psalm 33, verse 8, Psalm 46, verse 10, and Psalm 111, verse 9. So again, this gives good cross references we can go to throughout the book of Psalms and see that there. Again, Psalm 33, verse 8, Psalm 46:10, and Psalm 111, verse 9. Just be silent, O flesh, before the Lord, for he is raised up out of his holy habitation. So we see that there. But this is something we wanted to go through. We wanted to go through and see, again, Zechariah's third vision. We see how it connects with the first and second vision. See a multitasking going on here. So we're seeing also how measuring takes place not only in the book of Zechariah, but in multiple books. We're seeing how it's also is going to play out as they start to measure and build and construct and do what they do at this point in the book of Zechariah, how it's going to play out in the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then play out in the books of Hebrews through Revelation. And so prophecy will have its point where it plays out, but it's based on what they're doing at the what is the here and now for the book of Zechariah. So with that, we'll stop here for Zechariah's third vision. We'll get into the fourth vision on Sunday, and then we'll kind of go from there. But we wanted to just go through and make sure we examine these visions because they're deep visions. They kind of, when you study this book, it gets you ready to study the book of Revelation, or vice versa. You study the book of Revelation, you can probably go through this book no problem because they're equally deep. And you go through, you study this, you kind of zoom in and you start cross-referring, you start kind of examining the visions, examining this. You could go through the book of Daniel, the book of Zechariah, the book of Revelation, and go, okay, now I'm digging deep. Now I'm seeing what these books have to say. And get you ready for, chapters like Daniel chapter 11, get you ready for Zechariah, book of Revelation, things like that. So with that, we'll stop here. See if there's any kind of thoughts or questions or comments on what we just went through.
I do have a question I want to ask. Could you make clear again who the branches are?
Branches?
Yeah, you talked about, the branches.
And the parable, like when we were cross-referring to parables to,
Who are the branches? Are they the Jews that survived the Holocaust, or are they the nations that are going to the kingdom? Because that's where they know
no,
the Jews.
there's nothing to do with the Holocaust.
Holocaust. What I meant.
The exile?
No, not exile, not the Holocaust, but the end times, the Jews that survived the end time, or are they those nations that are going to be going to the kingdom for their blessing?
Let's see. I think when you're talking about the like the parable of the mustard seed, and then turns to a tree, and the branches branch out, and the nation's sitting there.
Yeah,
That's
which
pretty much.
nations are you referring to? Are you referring to?
Well, you've got the pretty much that parable says little flock, you're going to start out small, but then when the kingdom comes, you're going to grow.
Okay, so you're talking about the little flock.
Yeah.
Okay,
And so it's going to grow. They're going to grow. That nation is going to grow into a huge kingdom when the kingdom comes,
Right.
and the kingdom is going to expand into all the world, branch like. And then the kingdoms, you're going to have sheep nations and goat nations, and the goat nations just get burnt up or thrown away. And then you get these sheep nations that are loyal. They helped out during the tribulation with the little flock, and they perch in they plug themselves in to the kingdom. And
Okay, so who are the nations that are going to the kingdom for their blessings? Those are the sheep nations.
yeah. Well, it also depends on where you've got, because there's also a time where there's Satan is loosed after 1,000 years, and over 1,000 years, you'll have people that are just rebellious against God, no matter if he's standing right in front of them or if he's not in front of them. But
Yeah.
over time, enemies get built up. But it just, as God's timeline moves on, there's different things happening, different people loyal, different things take place. People become unloyal. Even in a kingdom, even where God is in a kingdom ruling with the rod of iron, Satan gets let loose for a little time, and then people say, you know what, let's see if we can throw God out or something. After 1,000 years.
Okay, so, but during that 1,000-year reign, during that 1,000-year period of time, which nations are the nations? I'm just
Oh, I
trying to get
don't
it clear in my
know
own,
which nation. I have no idea which nation.
but they're not Jewish nations.
They plug into the
They
kingdom.
plug into the kingdom, into
Yeah.
the Jewish kingdom,
Yeah.
but they're not Jewish people. They're people who have survived the end times, or nations
Yeah,
that
by
have
being by becoming sheep nations. And then at some point people make their choice saying, I don't like being ruled with a rod of iron. Or they say, I will comply with being ruled with a rod of iron. But the Lord figures out who's who by letting Satan loose for a
But don't those nations also cling to the Jewish people because they know God is with them?
at a initial point, yeah, when they want to go into the kingdom, or when they just depending on where this is all at in the beginning, when they want to go into that kingdom, when they want to be free of the tribulation, and when they want to go and be a part of what's going on, they're already trying to help them out by being that sheep nation and help the little flock and be a part of what they're doing, or at least help them out.
Okay, but those are nations other than the Jews and the little flock.
Yeah,
Oh,
whoever they
okay,
are.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. That's all I have. That's all I, okay, now it's clear. All right. Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know if there's any other thoughts or questions or. All right, so we'll wrap up here. We'll go into the fourth vision on Sunday, and we'll kind of go from there, and then kind of see where we're at after the fourth vision. I know we kind of wanted to go halfway through and then kind of see where we're at, and then we either go back to the parables, or we can kind of make a halfway mark and keep going, or not. We can kind of decide where we want to be. That's kind of the good part about doing our own studies. So. For now, we'll wrap up, and we'll be back here on Sunday with Zechariah's fourth vision. So, all right.
Bye, Rebecca.